welcome everyone to this clearly incredibly important and timely online event to oppose the dangerous US-led build-up to a new Cold War on China. The event marks the launch of the statement, "A new Cold War against China is against the interests of humanity," which forms the basis for today's discussion. It's a call for all those opposed to this ominous turn in world affairs to come together and organise. Today's meeting is a truly global gathering. We're delighted to have registrations from 49 countries, and the statement has now been translated into 16 languages so far. So I'm Jenny Clegg, and I'm the author of a book entitled China's Global Strategy Towards a Multipolar World. I'm also active in the peace and anti-war movement in Britain, and I will be chairing the proceedings. Before I go on, I'd like to bring in the convener of the event, Carlos Martinez, to explain how this meeting came about. Carlos?
Thank you very much, Jenny, and thank you, everyone. Thank you for attending today's event. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you to the audience. My name is Carlos Martinez. I'm a writer and activist based in London, and I'm one of the event organizers. And I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to introduce the meeting and explain how it came about and why it's taking place. So the idea to have an event around the new Cold War came from informal discussions I was having with a few contacts, and I'll mention those people now since they're the ones who've done the hard work of organizing the meeting. That's Ajit Singh, Danny Haifong, Chiao Collective, Fiona Edwards, and John Ross. And we decided to put together a small organizing group with a view to planning an event and launching a campaign, because the issue of the new Cold War is becoming seemingly more important by the day. Particularly this year, the US and its allies have been seriously escalating their anti-China rhetoric around the pandemic, around trade issues, around Hong Kong, around Xinjiang. And along with the rhetoric comes sanctions, diplomatic pressure, and a ramped up military threat. We seem to have reached a situation in which the sort of Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld project for a new American century has moved from, if you like, the neoconservative fringes to taking center stage. It's become a consensus position. This is a unilateralist strategy that aims to cement US dominance and ultimately to prevent the emergence of a more democratic, a more equal, a more multipolar world. And for those people around the world, which I think is the large majority, that desire peace, that desire progress, that desire cooperation to tackle the major problems faced by humanity, this new Cold War constitutes a very dangerous and a very worrying situation. And that's why we chose to organize on an international basis, because this is an issue that affects all of humanity and has implications for the future of the planet. It was particularly important for us to incorporate Chinese progressive opinion, which unfortunately is something that's rarely heard in the West, and to help build a conversation with voices from around the world, including the US peace movement, the British peace movement, the Latin American left, and elsewhere. And I'm really glad that we've been able to put together such an international platform with speakers from China, the US, Britain, India, Venezuela, Russia, and Canada. This issue isn't going to go away anytime soon. There's a lot of work to do. So please, I hope that everyone will keep in touch, and let's try to consolidate our forces globally against the insanity of a new Cold War. And with that introduction, I will hand you back to Jenny Clegg.
Thanks very much, Carlos. Before I start introducing the panel speakers, I'll just have a few words of introduction myself. Thinking about the current developments, I recall an article that was published in 2003 by an anti-war journalist in the leading newspaper, which had the headline, "Iraq, Iran, then China next?" ? It seems that the moment of China next has now arrived. Just as the COVID virus began to spread, making so starkly clear the urgency for governments to cooperate against the pandemic, US-China relations deteriorated sharply. With Trump's racialized rhetoric casting China as the villain, what had started as differences over trade became elevated into the realm of ideology. Now, differences over trade can be negotiated over and resolved, but once China is called a liar, once China is racially abused, what is there to talk about? Reinforced by an incessant flow of negative media coverage, the China threat is portrayed now in existential terms as a threat to the very values of world civilization embodied by the West. It is now that we start to enter the terrain of a new Cold War. This is no mere war of words. There's been a serious military build-up by the US to contain China. And this has been ramped up even further as the deadly virus was devastating the US population with full force, diverting yet more funds from health into the military. An astonishingly callous disregard for human life, compounding Trump's appalling misgovernment of the COVID crisis in a bid precisely to claim the US as the best power in the world to govern. Events, particularly over the last couple of weeks, have become increasingly worrisome, and it looks in many ways as if a new Cold War may be starting to solidify. The US has passed new acts to cover Xinjiang and Hong Kong, existing alongside Tibet and Taiwan acts, gestures that threaten Chinese sovereignty in some kind of imitation of the calls by imperialist powers over a century ago to dismember China. On July the 13th, Mike Pompeo made a statement strengthening US policy in the South China Sea, seemingly to lay out the legal foundations of war with China. And now we have the further provocation of the illegal closure of the Chinese consulate in Houston. Where will this stop? Trump has also intensified the drive to force other countries to choose sides, using Huawei as the lever. 5G is now apparently to divide the world between freedom and democracy on the one hand and China's so-called bullying and coercion on the other. And of course, I can't resist mentioning here how Mike Pompeo was in the UK last week calling for US-UK unity against China's bullying, having of course just bullied the US government into stripping Huawei from its networks. World-threatening crises are converging. Pandemic, yet another economic recession, and looming ever closer, the catastrophe of climate change. People are waking up to the fact now that the US-China relationship is the most important relationship now shaping the world. The increasing aggression against China poses the most serious threat to world peace, and as such, it is a massive obstacle in the way of humanity successfully dealing with these crucial common issues that we're facing. So why have US-China relations taken such a nosedive? How might the new Cold War develop in the coming months, unfolding into the future? And above all, what is to be done? How can we, the people, shape the future? We have before us, as Carlos said, a panel of internationally renowned speakers from across the world, a multipolarity, you might say, of scholars and academics, political analysts and activists, and in most cases, all of these, who will bring a great wealth and diversity of knowledge and experience to bear to get to grips with the unprecedented challenges before us.